When I invented MyPillow, my passion was to help each and every one of you. And 20 years later, all of your support is what keeps us going. Because of you, we've been able to create thousands of USA jobs and help millions get the best sleep ever. To thank you, my employees and I are bringing you a limited edition MyPillow. The Giza Elegance MyPillow is made with my patented adjustable fill, the most amazing cotton, and a 2-inch pipe gusset. It has 4 custom loft levels, machine washable and dryable, and you get my 60-day money-back guarantee and 10-year warranty.
Go to mypillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to get your limited edition 20th anniversary MyPillow queen size. Retails for $69.98, now only $19.98. That's right, get a queen size MyPillow for only $19.98.
From all of us here at MyPillow,
thanks America!
Welcome, everybody. Okay.
Oh, real quick here, many of you have heard us talking about our sponsor, Ascent Nutrition, over the previous months, and we'd like to announce that they're offering an even higher discount at 20% off for all products for the month of August, only for Badlanders. With the fall and winter approaching, their pine needle extract product is expected to sell out, and they want to give all of you an early chance to buy as we go into the colder months. This is their best seller and is extracted to be stronger than the pine needle tea itself. It is wild harvested, easy to use, and tastes fantastic. It's great for detoxification, immune system, respiratory health, brain and gut health, and is safe for both kids and adults. Click the link in the description and use code BADLANDS20 for 20% off your entire order. Be sure to take advantage of this offer now, as it is specifically for you, the Badlands subscribers.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Knowledge Base here with Jordan Sather and myself, Justin Deschamps. How's it going, Jordan?
Going fantastic, man. I'm excited for today's show.
Yeah, we're going to get into a subject that I think might be the most fundamental, and it's all about discernment. Discernment is, you hear it talked about a lot. Obviously, it's very important. And when we talk about discernment, we're talking about sorting fact from fiction, or at least trying to, and also sorting out what is the most valuable thing to do. I would argue both of those two things, truth and value arguments, fall into that category. So I think this is one of the most important subjects that could ever be covered, because it's kind of like the beginning of everything. Like whether we're talking about aliens or Trump or Q or whatever it is, whether flat earth is real or not or something like that, at the end of the day, we're always going to have to use some process of discernment. How do we know claim A is true? How do we know perspective B is true? Is it not true? Is there somewhere in between? Well, we're going to talk about all of those tools today and likely in future episodes of the show. So it should be pretty exciting.
Right. And discernment has been the most important thing to hone through thousands of years of human history. And it's important for not just trying to gather what's going on the national level or the world level, but also in your day-to-day life. I mean, are you trying to fix your car? Are you trying to run a business? Are you trying to do this or that? Honing your discernment, honing your critical thinking skills helps you navigate every single aspect of life, from the most mundane things up to the grand narratives that the powers that be are trying to brainwash us with. And you can't just hope for it. You can't just pray for better discernment. It's an active process that takes experience, it takes effort, it takes doing to become a better discerner. So yeah, I mean, incredibly important. Glad we're getting into it.
Yeah, agreed. So we're going to be covering an article I wrote in 2018. So I'll go ahead and pop it on the screen for everybody here. And that is this article. It's a discernment article. Actually, I'm going to use this side one. That looks a little better. So this article I wrote on Stillness in the Storm. For those of you who don't know, Stillness in the Storm is the site that got me started, and all this actually helped get Jordan started. So we've got a lot of love and affection for this site. Recently,
man, I've been a stillness reader since when did I come across that website? 2012 or 2013? You started it in 2013, right?
Yeah, exactly. 2013.
So must have been right around then. Yeah.
Right there. Yeah. We're covering sovereign stuff and free energy and all sorts of cool stuff like that.
Yep.
So yeah, discernment. And I think this phrase encapsulates it beautifully. Discernment is what? What is discernment? Well, it's accurately reflecting the truth within yourself. So in order to get to the question of what is discernment, which we are going to get to today, we also are going to answer some more fundamental questions like, what is the truth? What is the truth, like with a capital THE, TREUTH versus a truth or something that I believe to be true? Well, there's a key difference there that we have to consider. And one of the coolest things about understanding these fundamentals is when you have these fundamentals in hand, the downstream effect is it tends to reorient all of the things you believe and think about, because at the end of the day, the cabal use our lack of knowledge with respect to these things as one of their biggest linchpins to just shoehorn in as much propaganda, false beliefs about God, existence, rights, law, you name it. Everything is kind of centered on your ability not to discern the truth and not to know what the truth is. So by getting that out of the way, like I said, you front load like so many amazing things for yourself when it comes to this question.
Two things I want to jump in on there real quick. Number one, it's truly breathtaking how many psyops are waged against society on planet Earth today in the realm of psychological warfare, because you have all these ways of media dissemination. I mean, since the printing press was invented in the 1400s, then radio and television in the 1900s, up to the internet, especially in social media over the past couple of decades, every angle they're taking through thousands and thousands of different assets or unwitting agents and useful idiots, just disseminating their propaganda. It's more important than ever to hone discernment. And then, as you were talking about, Justin, capital T truth, or the absolute truth, is quite different than what we could call somebody's personal truth, which I don't even like to call personal truth. It's more of just perspective or opinion. Because, for instance, if you take a cylinder, you could have somebody looking directly at the cylinder.
Mm-hmm.
To them, it appears to be a circle, and that to them is true. But then if you have somebody on top of the cylinder, to them, it looks like a rectangle. And from that person's perspective, that is also true. But both of them aren't seeing the absolute truth of what the 3D image is. It's just their particular perspectives. So when somebody says, like, my personal truth, or that's your truth, not my truth, something like that, that's kind of just relegating everything to perspective. And what's important is to really kind of separate yourself as being an outside observer, which is difficult for a lot of people. It's difficult to be that outside observer of the situation, but that's what can help see the absolute truth of the matter and the whole image for what it is.
Yeah, spot on. As a matter of fact, I think that's a really good place to start. So I'm going to pull up that image, which is this one right here, or
there you go.
Very similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah.
So, what you were just saying perfectly describes our relationship to truth. It's one of the most fundamental relationships. I would argue, kind of your relationship with God, it might be the most primary. And then the one right after that is your relationship with the all truth, the capital T truth, what I like to call the whole truth or the absolute truth. And there's a huge, huge difference that must be understood. And that is this. There's the grand truth, the infinite truth. I often describe it as an infinite singularity, because when you try to get your hands on one piece of it, you realize that you can't really separate that one piece from everything else. If you go out, stand outside right now, and I was going to ask you to point out the line that separates the tree from the background, you could probably point to it, but the actual line isn't necessarily there in a way that you can clearly differentiate, in a way that leaves nothing to uncertainty. There is a range. And what that means is that ultimately the truth is a singularity. It's all one. And all we can really do when we try to assess truth or true claims or false claims or things like that is try to accumulate a little piece of that in our own beingness. So in order to really get your head around this, just consider that on the left-hand side, we have a square. On the right-hand side, we have a circle. Now, these are both what we might call shadows of the center object, which is a three-dimensional object, the cylinder. And each one is true to a certain extent. If you were to stand in front of, or you to stand on the left-hand side and look at that cylinder, it would look like a square to you. If you were to stand on the side with a circle, it would look like a circle to you. So they are true in that sense. But it's also not the whole truth, because the whole truth is that they're both true, and that we're dealing with something that is more fundamental than just a square or a circle. So, when it comes to our relationship with the truth, as human beings, the best we can do is get an accurate snapshot, an accurate perspective. We can't claim the whole truth completely. All we can do is get a little piece of it and then absorb that into ourselves. And if we do so correctly, then we'll have that, and that piece can grow and expand like a seed with time and eventually create really awesome, intrinsic bodies of knowledge. But one of the things that's very humbling when you start to get into discernment is that you realize that there's no such thing as absolute certainty. You cannot know something is true or false with 100% certainty. The best you can do is get a probability or plausibility assessment of whether that may or may not be true. And then you go from there. So,
except that there's two genders.
No. Yeah, right.
But what did I want to say? I wanted to say that this is why becoming a holistic thinker is so important, or being varied in what you research and what you learn from. When you pigeonhole yourself into one particular line of thinking, one particular group, one particular book, you pigeonhole and become so narrow-minded that the absolute truth, or at least getting as close to the absolute truth as you can, is nearly impossible. For instance, this is a big problem in mainstream or establishment science these days, is you have all these scientists that specialize. They specialize in one industry, whether it's geology or archaeology or chemistry or biology, what have you. And because they specialize and get so narrow focused in one little subset of data and information, they have a very tough time seeing the big picture and being able to discern grander truths about science or about reality, what have you, because of all these little specialties. And one great example is in the healthcare industry. You have oncology, then you have physiology, then you have all these different specializations, and it ends up that these kind of standardized doctors end up not knowing jack about health, holistic health, the basics of human health, because they just become specialists. And a lot of them specialize in more so chemistry, being drug pushers, than actually anything else like nutrition or otherwise. So being the holistic thinker, researching all kinds of different sciences, spiritual traditions, books, histories, everything, then allows you to be able to cycle easier through what is untrue, being able to throw out what might not be the case and figure out what might be true and come close to that absolute truth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, spot on, dude. Exactly. It's so incredibly supportive for your ability to comprehend real truth and have that useful for your life if you can think holistically. And that's why they don't teach you holistic thinking in educational institutions. They teach you black and white thinking, true, false. But in reality, as I just mentioned, and we've been talking about, anything that human beings can say this is true is actually just a claim of truth, which we're going to get into, which means a claim is saying one thing, but there are other possibilities. And if you never think about those other possibilities, then the one that might be the most correct might not be available to you, and you won't have it, to work with. So you're spot on. Real quick, we got first Rumble Rant. Thank you so much, Cottage Gypsies, for your support. So happy you're able to catch the show live as well. So let me switch over. I wanted to actually go back to this image real quick, because what it also highlights, not only does it highlight the multidimensional thinking part, or holistic thinking. So if you have the ability to see both perspectives, then both perspectives combined often create a more accurate picture of the truth. And this is what's really crazy about our pursuit of truth, is you might think, well, if I want only the absolute truth, I have to only study true things, and anything that is in the category of wrong or incorrect or false would hinder me if I entertained it, if I looked at it, if I comprehended it. That's not actually the case. The interesting thing is that the more information you absorb, period, regardless of whether it's true or false, the better you're able to see and discern the truth itself. That's a kind of a weird paradox, which we'll get into a little bit more as well. It also means that it's a group effort. My knowledge is only what I have available, what I've taken the time to look at, to try to understand, to become fluent with, all that kind of stuff. You, Jordan, have other things that you focused on, and we have some overlap for sure. So it means that if we pool our resources, then our combined perspective on a lot of things is going to be way better, probably, squared instead of just doubled, with respect to the kind of information that it has, the power that it has to influence our ability to think critically, better, to make good value choices, to make better truth choices, things like this.
Right. If you hear something untrue from Jane Doe and you realize that it's untrue, one thing that is true you can learn from that is that Jane Doe is dumb or full of shit. So, you can, even in the unfactual things, the untrue things, you can still learn stuff from that. You just have to be able to identify that it's untrue. Thus, the discernment process.
Right. Exactly. Hey, we got another, racking up the Rumble Rant today. Hey, appreciate it. So we got another one here. Oh, if I can get it to load. There it goes. So we appreciate that, Sammy. Much appreciated. So I like this comment here. Truth can never be an absolute, not with two or more seekers of it. That's right, because the truth exists absolutely, for sure, but our ability to comprehend that absoluteness is limited for sure as well. All right, so let's get into it here. So if you wanted to read this article, I strongly suggest you keep it handy. I think it's the most popular article on stillness. I think it has something like 250,000 views or something crazy like that. So I'm just going to start to go through it here. So we've all heard how important discernment is. In the age of deception, seeking truth with wisdom is essential. It's a survival skill. The pros use established methods of discerning that we would greatly benefit from understanding, marrying logic with intuition to form a coherent tool set for meeting the challenges of belief that life has to offer. I'll show you 4 key steps to discernment in this article. So this is important. What discernment is not. Before we even talk about discernment, we got to discuss some misconceptions. Discernment is not about confirming something you hope or want to be true. And it's not about making you feel better about what you already believe. Discernment requires honest truth seeking. It requires humility. You have to want to know the truth, even if it means letting go of a belief you've held on to for a long time. And I feel like this phrase really encapsulates this. I don't know where I got this from, but it says, be willing to be wrong so you can learn how to be right.
And I think one of the most important words in there is the word feel. that you just read.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling. When it comes to discernment, there is no feeling. You need to throw your emotions out the window and be a detached, objective observer to what is, and be willing to change the little belief bubble that you have. That belief bubble needs to be permeable. It needs to be malleable, not rigid, you know? So
Exactly.
sometimes the truth is uncomfortable. Sometimes it is upsetting. That's, of course, if you have certain attachments to certain ideas and beliefs. But if you, again, like Justin said, be humble and be willing to change, I think that's the crux of the issue here, being willing to change.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, you know, that cuts to a really core fundamental. We'll just take a moment to explore real quick, which is that, you know, how is it that the creator reaches you? Well, one of the ways that the creator reaches you is through the truth. It's through the information that's coming through the thing that we call reality. And that also means that since the creator is infinite and you're finite, that the game of attuning yourself to new information through humility never really stops. Now, if you try to force it to stop, then that's when you get into a lot of the nasty things that we're trying to get away from on this world, like psychopathy, like slavery, like tyranny, these kind of things. People who want to reign in hell instead of serve in heaven kind of thing. So humility is really, really important. All right. I got to be careful not to go off on too many tangents when I do this. All right, so let's second. Discernment is more about the process than result. This is key. A lot of people think, well, I'm going to hit this discernment button, and at the end of the 5-minute, 10-minute, 30-minute, whatever, days or weeks process, you're going to have a rock-solid answer of truth that is going to stay the same throughout the rest of your life. Well, odds are that's probably not going to happen. Odds are that even if you claim a piece of truth that is pretty accurate, because that truism or the fact or the belief is a reflection of the truth, and that reflection is low resolution with respect to how much information is in reality, it means you're going to have to update it at some point. And so you always got to keep, like I said, it's a process. So we want a definitive answer. Yes, this claim is true or not, but rarely does the discernment process give us such clear results. Instead, discernment is more about using a personal investigation process that first and foremost gives you personal knowledge and understanding. You actually learn something that expands your complement of truth. And when I say complement of truth, I mean the accumulated bodies of facts, sketches, beliefs that you walk around with. Now, I think I'm going to get to it later. Admittedly, I haven't read this article in a while, but let me just get this out of the way up front. Like we've mentioned on the show before, when we interact with information, we're not actually claiming to interact with reality directly. We're just getting a snapshot. We have the territory. So if you're an artist, you're looking out at a beautiful vista, you got trees, you got a sun, you got a lake or a river, something like that. And you want to render that inside a form that you can walk away with and hang on your wall or something like that. Well, you have to put that in a form, and that form is an impression, an image, a rendering of what you see with your eyes in the vista. That form is never going to be as information rich and complete as the actual scene itself. You know, if you've ever looked at a super high resolution image, I forget the term for this. I think they're like ultra HD images, but you know, it's an image that they often use on satellites or in space or things like this to take pictures of galaxies. And if you were to take a picture like this, let's say if you took a picture and you were looking out from the Seattle Sky Needle, and you took a picture down south of you into California, some of these images are so high resolution that you can zoom in and actually see like trash cans like thousands of miles away. That's how crazy high resolution they are. And so when it comes to our impressions of the truth, we're going to look out into the world. We're going to look into reality where all of that information is, the infinite all truth, the infinite whole truth. And we're going to grab a piece of it. And hopefully if we do our job right, the piece that we grab is going to look like the truth that it just came from. And we're creating a sketch of reality, basically. It's very similar to the hero's journey process. What does the hero do? Well, he has to, at some point in his journey, descend into the underworld and get something out of it that then he's going to bring back to the overworld, so to speak. And in a lot of ways, when you choose humility, when you choose to recognize the fact that your maps that you've been building, your beliefs, your facts, are only as at best partially correct, then you constantly are updating them and you save yourself a lot of headache and challenge. All right, so let's get back into it here. So where is that? There it is. So getting to the answer of true or false should not be our focus. That's more of a side effect of honest and complete investigation. That's one of the things that we just have to accept when we're doing discernment. And we want a yes or no answer. We want, yes, this is absolutely true, and you don't have to think about it again. Unfortunately, you're not going to get that. If you deceive yourself into thinking that you can get that, then you'll block new information in the future or labor under a delusion for years. And that happens to people all the time. If you find yourself leaning toward an answer, but you don't understand why it's true, then you've missed out on what discernment should provide you, which is understanding. That's one of the key things about discernment. We talk about intrinsic belief and extrinsic belief. Intrinsic belief is that you actually are in possession of why and how something may or may not be true, or at least your attempt to understand it. If you have an extrinsic belief, you don't know. An expert, somebody told you, Neil deGrasse Tyson, whoever expert you want to throw in there, that Fauci will say, Fauci said the shots are safe and effective. And if you're an extrinsic believer, then you're just going to assume, well, that's Fauci. He's the highest paid man in America. Like, clearly he knows what he's doing. That must be true. But you're laboring under delusion because you didn't question it. If you seek for understanding instead of an answer, then a conclusion related to the question of is it true or false naturally presents itself. All right, so let's get into what discernment actually is. Discernment is defined as, this is the official definition, the act of judging well. But what are we judging? No matter what it is that you're trying to discern, the same basic factors are at play: a claim, a reality, and comparison. So those are the key elements there, and I just want to focus on for a second. If you think about our knowledge of truth, our knowledge of truth is a sketch. Like if I asked you to take a picture of anything, you're going to get that picture. And that picture you can use and you can hold it up to the reality. So if I took a picture, if we're sitting inside somewhere in like a cafeteria and you can't see the outside, and I tell you it's raining outside, and then I show you what it looks like, a picture of the outside where it's raining, then you can take that picture and you can go walk outside and look at the sky and say, well, does it match the picture or not? That's effectively what all discernment is. You have to figure out, well, what is the claim? What is the picture? What is the thing being described? When we hear about discernment, we're not necessarily dealing with images of pictures. We're dealing with usually words and descriptions and arguments and things like this. But it's the same basic concept. A description describes something in the same way a picture describes something in 1,000 words or less, something like that. Then we have the actual reality, which is whatever the picture is of. So there's the reality, or the source, the raw information, the whole truth. Then there's the claim. And then we're going to go through the process of comparing. And all of that comparison magic happens inside of us, inside our minds. So whether you're trying to see if someone told you the truth, attempting to determine if a personal experience and resulting meaning are accurate, or you're delving deeply into highly abstract concepts like the ultimate nature and purpose of existence, discernment is the tool you'll use.
And
So
when it
Go
comes to the claim aspect of things, this is why it's so important to ask questions and try to analyze what somebody's really trying to say through their claim. Because let's be honest, most people are not good communicators, whether they have limited vocabulary, whether they're just more visual thinkers and don't have the oratory skills to spew or word vomit what's coming in through their head. It's difficult for some people. A lot of people are more photographic or visual thinkers. They think in images instead of words and thoughts and phrases. So asking what somebody really means when they say something and getting them to describe it further in detail, or when you see a post on the internet, trying to figure out what somebody really means by it, that helps the discernment process. Questioning what somebody means, or questioning what somebody is referring to when they make a particular claim, trying to get to the crux of the matter there, and then parsing their words as well. If they make a particular claim, parse every single word. Don't just read the whole paragraph and then come to a knee-jerk reaction of, okay, this is what they mean, because that might not be what they mean. We also, as well, a lot of times, we read very fast. We skim, and we don't slow down and take the time to parse everything that was said in that claim. And then we jump to conclusions, and we assume this is what they meant, when that might not really be what they meant. So make sure you take the time to analyze what they mean, figure out what they meant, and then get the correct claim before you then go into the discernment process about that claim.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because it's so often, as I'm sure you can attest to a million times, straw manning takes place. Somebody's reacting to what they think you said, which might not be actually what you said or what you're claiming. And then you're not discerning, the thing itself.
Yeah, like I love that Twitter has an edit function now. I know a lot of people hate it,
Oh,
but
really? No kidding.
I will. If you pay for the little blue check mark, you can edit your
Got
tweets
it.
for like an hour. But on Telegram, you can edit posts there. Although I'll make a post and I'll probably edit it 2 or 3 times as I continue to figure out, okay, that's what it really meant. Oh shoot, my communication wasn't that clear in this post, so I'm going to edit it a couple times to make sure I'm very clear in what I'm trying to say. And it's taken years to become a better communicator, and I'm by no means an expert writer or great at it, but it's a long-term skill to develop, at least the communication aspect of it. And discernment is a lifelong skill to hone. So
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, spot on. I have, let's see, where is it? There it is. I like this comment here from Battle Hamster. People get so butthurt when you ask questions, like taking questions personally. Yeah, that happens, and there's a reason why. It's because we socialize. The mechanism of socialization is information. So what that means is when somebody's claiming something to be true, and part of the reason they're speaking it is they want to feel togetherness around that truism. And when somebody questions it, then it not only brings their conclusion into question, but now they're cut off and they don't have necessarily that socialization effect.
Yeah, their sense of security becomes threatened, and they think, oh, you don't believe what I believe, then they start getting real uncomfortable about that. But you got to be careful with a lot of people who are, who have personality issues, and they act like they're just honestly questioning, but you can tell it's a loaded question, and they have a nefarious agenda behind their questions. So that just takes a social intelligence or emotional intelligence part to be able to identify when people are BSing with their questions. Mainstream media does it all the time, right?
Oh, yeah. They're great on the debates when they do that kind of stuff.
Right. And the crazy narcissists in your life will do it all the time too. Like, I'm just asking a question. No, you're not, dumbass. You're being an idiot.
Yeah, you're manipulating. Exactly. That's another great one from Rose Thistle Art. True facts should hold true even in new situations. If not, then questioning might enlighten us to better understanding how the facts are true, or we need to reject the facts. Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's why free speech is so important. Like, if we ultimately, part of the game is talking to each other about what we believe. And when we do that, we give an opportunity for somebody else's opinion to influence and improve our own. And if the fact is true, if the claim is true, then it'll still be there at the end of the process. It'll actually be better. It'll have more higher resolution. It's like, imagine if there was a game where you could take a photo with your phone in really low resolution and then share that with other people and have them take the same photo. And then every time it got shared, it got higher quality and more resolution across time. That's kind of what using your mouth and talking about things that you believe does if you're doing it the right way. So,
speaking of questioning, though, do you think there's a point where we can question too much and we keep questioning, and we don't even begin the discernment process or trying to analyze what might or might not be true because we just get caught in questioning?
I definitely think that's the case. To give a scenario here, like maybe we're trying to figure out whether or not, I don't know, what really happened with all of those health treatments back in the early 1900s that seemed mysteriously disappeared. And every time we get right to the edge of the subject matter, so we're actually going to dig into the information, some question moves us away from the subject, or we're not dealing with topics properly. That is definitely an issue, because in order to do discernment properly, you have to, just like you're drawing a picture, you have to treat each element and factor with precision, with care and dedication. If you try to just willy-nilly scattershot around, then what you get is a willy-nilly scattered shot, claim of truth that you're to work with, and it doesn't really work too well.
It's almost as if somebody's panning for gold being the truth, and there's a big gold nugget right in front of them being good information. And instead of taking that gold nugget and bringing it back, I don't know, to the town to sell it or whatever, they just keep panning and keep panning and keep panning. And they don't realize that there's something solid they could take to market right there in front of them, because they're so obsessed with the panning process. They could be so obsessed with the questioning process that they don't take a minute to balance the questioning, the panning with the, okay, finding what is solid and valuable right there being information.
Yeah, exactly. And actually, that brings up another good point, which is that you have to be brave. You have to have courage, and you cannot be contemptuous. So what contempt is the refusal or rejection of something that you could otherwise do that you should be doing. Like if we're trying to figure out like what is the best route to go from, I don't know, Boston to Seattle, well, we have to actually consider all of the different possibilities and give them a fair day in court, I like to say. You can't do something where it's like, well, Justin suggested this route, but because I don't like Justin or I don't like his mustache or whatever, I'm not going to consider what he has to say and think that you actually did an honest discernment process. This happens all the time. You'll bring information up from the main or two mainstream people or kind of normies, and they're like, oh, well, I would consider what you just said, but that comes from a fake news source or something like that. And therefore I can just dismiss everything and not even really consider it. But that's not really a discernment process. If you want to do discernment, you actually have to get your hands dirty. You have to be brave and actually be honestly explore what another person has to say and not just use anything you can to deflect it. And the last thing I'll say on that is that if that is the real standard, if true courage when it comes to exploring information is what is needed to truly discern whether something is true or false, what does that say about all the different types of debates we have flying around right now where nobody really wants to agree on basic rules, and instead of people being honest and speaking to what the other party's actually saying, they're just taking any opportunity they can to deflect, throw names, get loud, these kind of things.
Do you think some people get lost in the questioning or get comfortable in the questioning because they're scared of taking a convicted side about something?
Like they want something to be true and therefore not willing to look at another side?
Or they're just not willing to be steadfast in a position because of the possible flack or you know, being convicted in anything will invariably get you hatred from somebody who has the opposite position. So they're scared of conviction, or they're scared of they're scared of being steadfast in that position because they just don't want that flack. So they're going to continue questioning. And that kind of becomes their comfort zone in not taking a side about anything.
I see what you mean now. Yeah. I think that happens quite a bit.
Maybe they could be scared of commitment. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, I think that happens. I mean, I think it happens everywhere, and it happens a lot in relationships and in, we might say, honestly accepting the reality of a situation. So in other words, you say you're transgender, you say you want X, Y, Z, and then you go and, you start to research it. And if you're honest, you're like, wait a minute, this whole gender affirming care thing, it doesn't actually turn me into a man or a woman that I think I'm going to be. It's turning me into something else, but it's not a man or a woman. You're at that point, you have a courage point, you have a choice point. Are you going to be humble and accept the fact that your desire, which is to transform into the opposite sex, cannot be achieved with gender affirming care, and therefore you have to let go and be humble of the desire you have? And I recognize that desire is itself not an objectively value or the most objectively valuable choice to make. I mean, people struggle with that stuff. I struggle with it. It took me years to figure out, some things in my life that had I, could go reach back in time and smack myself around a bit and be like, stop flaking around, stop being, just be honest with yourself. Stop just endlessly asking questions. Realize that, this is the truth. And now it's time to be courageous and provisionally accept that. That's the other thing, is that because we can never know the truth 100% with absolute certainty, what does that mean? Well, it means we need provisional truth. We need to develop the muscle of investing ourselves in what we think might be true and then seeing what happens. And the word for that is called faith. We use faith when it comes to discernment to see if something is true, and we reflect on what happens, something like that. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. I mean, I'm just kind of questioning you about questions because I think there's a balance that needs to be had there. And finding that balance is important. So yeah, our rants here are helping find that balance. We need to question and we need to be open-minded, but I think there is a sense of conviction that needs to be had when we do find something that makes sense and something that's logical and seeming to be truthful. I think we do need to be steadfast in that information, in that truth, instead of always taking kind of a wishy-washy approach to things, right? So anyway, before we continue and dive into your article, we do have a couple more companies to shout out here. And one of them is 5280 Distilling. 5280 Distilling is a great new Badlands sponsor, founded and run by three friends from Littleton, Colorado. 5280 Distilling uses innovative distilling techniques, fresh and organic ingredients, and crisp Rocky Mountain water to produce excellent distilled spirits. Colorado water is a game changer. And let's talk about a couple of these spirits. Their Cackler's Whiskey Blends, traditional bourbon, and 5280 mellows the spice by combining traditionally aged bourbon with accelerated aged rye bourbons for a refined taste. Then there is the Hearthstone Irish Whiskey, and in this one, 5280 combines new and old world traditions, blending a 3-year-old Irish whiskey with rye whiskeys, bringing forth a surprisingly sweet floral fragrance with hints of toasted oak and vanilla. These incredible products and many others can be shipped to 34 states. Hopefully you're in one of those. So check the website for availability. 5280 Distilling is offering free shipping for purchases over $95. And you can also get 10% off your order at 5280distilling.com by using the promo code Badlands. And one more here. We've got Benson Honey Farms and their delicious raw honey coming to you from the Nebraska hives of this America First family business. The Benson process does not overheat, pasteurize, or filter the honey, and that guarantees that all the pollen and enzymes, all the good stuff stays in the honey, delivering better health for you and your family. Benson honey is shelf stable and preserves itself. It will never spoil or turn on you, so it's always there to sweeten your coffee, tea, or join peanut butter and bananas on a sandwich. When you go to bensonhoneyfarms.com, you're buying honey directly from the beekeeper and reclaiming your personal honey supply chain and knowing exactly where your honey is coming from. Go to bensonhoneyfarms.com today and let them know that you heard about their amazing products from us by using rep code Badlands. That's bensonhoneyfarms.com, rep code Badlands. So, diving back into your article. You're muted, FYI.
I am muted. There we go.
There we go.
Whether you're trying to see if someone told you the truth, attempting to determine a personal experience is true, you need discernment. Okay, so because true knowledge is a master key to unlocking all of your potential. So we're asking, why is discernment important? Like, why the hell do we care about the truth? I mean, if the truth is so infinite and we're so prevented from learning it completely, then what the hell's the point? Well, it's because that's the way the game was set up. Basically, every single thing that you want to do in your life that has any kind of value to you requires your knowledge of the truth in some way. Now, you might stumble upon the pot of gold here and there, but if you want to be able to have that consistently, you need wisdom. You need to use your knowledge of the truth, so true knowledge, to do things that you care about in the world effectively. So when we say wisdom, we mean if you want to show up to work on time, then you go through all of the processes and steps that require true information. You know, if you don't know when to go to work, then you don't have accurate information. You can't get there on time. If you don't know where your keys are, you can't get there on time because you're running around. If you don't know what you're going to wear, you can't get there on time because you're running around trying to figure out your clothes. So, you know, literally at every level, if you just think about the fundamentals of how our reality works and relationship with reality works, the more truth in your possession, so true knowledge, the better your life will be fundamentally. Now, there's certain roadblocks that come up because of our resistance to the truth. Like, you don't want to necessarily acknowledge the fact that your wife stopped loving you 10 years ago because you flaked out and were a lazy bastard. But you should accept that fact so that you can do something about it, or whatever the situation might be. So the ultimate problem solver is a mind guided by truth. We need true knowledge to do things correctly in the world. So it's just basically a rant of me saying what I just said. So the role of consciousness is really important. Consciousness is the foundation for all subjective personal experience. The mind is the tool we use to gather data about our experience, whether internal feelings, insights, intuitions, or external observations and sensations. The body provides the setting for experiencing what the mind records, which includes feelings as well as intellectual data points or nuggets of information. Stated another way, the mind is the tool we use to recognize patterns. Patterns recorded in the mind are representations of reality, not reality itself. Consciousness is the dynamic exploration and experience of patterns recorded by the mind. Emotions are the overall holistic impression we feel in response to what is recorded in our mind, polarized in either negative or positive emotional expression, depending on our values and desires and pre-existing knowledge. All these factors work together to produce what we call experience. So I know I just packed a lot in here. I'll just briefly make sure that these concepts are solid. So we have reality is like an information soup, and you need something. You need a tool to access that information. What tool do we have? We have our body. Our body has sensors, feeling, touch, smell, taste, things like this. We have the central nervous system that can send that information to different parts so it can get processed. But ultimately, the workbench is your mind, your consciousness. So that's where the information is going to go to get recorded, as well as flipped around, analyzed, dissected, things like this, so that we can create an accurate map. So let's see. Consciousness is the laboratory where we conduct all the research to determine if something is true. So we're going to use all of the tools that consciousness has to offer, and we also have to accept the limitations of consciousness. And that's what we're about to get into. So your mind as the ultimate recording device, or your mind is the ultimate recording device, even though you are only consciously aware of a small fraction of what's happening at any given moment, your subconscious records essentially everything, or at least everything that it can make contact with. The mind is essentially a map maker, a cartographer. It takes all the pieces of your experience, like the chair you're sitting on right now, or the time of day based on ambient light, and records each element as a unique data point, which is a symbol on your map of knowledge. You know, if you were to think about any memory, think about your most favorite memory, then think about and describe what all of those aspects of your memory look like. And what you end up having is you have all these little pieces, these objects that your mind has kind of created a virtual representation of it. How do you know it's virtual? Well, it's because to use a different example, if I asked you to go outside and tell me what the weather is like right now, when you come back in to hop on the computer, wherever it is that you're going to send this message to me, you're going to have an image in your head, and that image isn't reality itself. It's like a photograph. It's like a virtual representation. The thing you observe is the territory. It's the raw or primary reality, while your mind records these observations as thought forms, ideas, or memories, maps of knowledge. So there's a lot we could get into there, and we will probably get more into that in the parenting section for sure, because that's like one of the most critical aspects to understand is like, how does your mind actually work? And one little just teaser on that, I'll say, because it's really interesting, especially with discernment, is that your body is like a sophisticated pre-programmed machine, and it's designed to identify things in reality. And when it's identified something, then it's going to associate with that identification some biological program. For example, when you're really hungry, if you've eaten pizza many times throughout your life, when you are hungry, you feel the sensation of hunger. Your body's going to say, hey, there's this thing that I need, food. We don't have it. We need to find it. So you're going to be on the prowl for food. When you see pizza, that pizza is going to be conceptualized or cognized in psychological terms as a tool to satisfy your need for hunger. And so what that means is that your brain, your mind, is constantly generating different images of reality and then assigning to those images, those object definitions, various types of circuitry and programmings and reactions. And that's pretty fluid in the sense that they can be tweaked and adjusted from time to time. That also means that when you go to do discernment, you're going to have it's going to be a very loaded process. You know, when you're trying to discern whether or not your wife is telling you the truth about where she was last night, you can't necessarily look at it with a disinterested perspective because she's your wife, and you definitely have an interest in the outcome or the interest in determining whatever that question is. So that's really good to keep in mind. You got to know that you've got biases, and you should be able to identify what those biases are so you can actually deal with the questions clearly and consistently.
A lot of subconscious baggage we all come with, and it's very difficult to unpack that.
Exactly. Okay, so this is a crucial aspect. We touched on it a little bit earlier. We're going to go over it again now. Psychologically, you don't actually interact directly with the world. There's too much information buzzing around in reality for you to do that. Instead, your mind creates maps of knowledge, or a kind of biological virtual reality environment, a phrase I've used before, where the individual components of experience can be seen in the mind's eye. Decisions are made from there. In this sense, it's as if a part of us that makes choices and exercises free will is hovering over a desk with maps on it. This is very similar to the Pixar film Inside Out. Have you ever seen the Pixar film Inside Out before?
No.
Oh man, next time we do a show on this, I'll see if I can find a clip. So basically what it does, it's a movie where this little girl has some kind of psychological break, and she kind of descends into her own subconscious. And when she gets into her own subconscious, it's presented as like a control room. And in the control room are all these different aspects of her, like anger, sadness, joy, happiness. And each one of them can kind of, grab onto the control room, and now they're running the show. And our beingness is very similar to that. Like inside of your head, inside of your being, are different versions of you. There's the angry version of you. There's the triggered version of you. There's the shamed version of you. There's the happy version of you. So there's all these different aspects of you. And some of them can get hold of the control room at times. And that influences your discernment process. And it certainly influences your perception. So that's what we're getting at there. All right, here we go. So this is the brain. I just wanted to touch a little bit on this. This whole thing, I would argue, at least one aspect of the brain is to basically act like your reality processor. The brain literally creates a version of reality that your soul can interact with. Now, you're not going to find that kind of language inside your average physiology course in college or anything like that, or psychology or anything like that. But I'll just tell you, this is my personal opinion. I think there's a good case to be made for this. The best way to think about psychology is that you have a soul that is in possession of a body, and the body is working to serve the needs of the soul. And the soul's job is to act as the governor of the body and basically make good decisions for life. And so that means that your brain is kind of creating a reality for you. And knowing what centers are and how they work and how they influence your perception, your emotions, your value system, all that is really very helpful when it comes to discernment, because as we've been talking about, we got tons of loaded biases and stuff like that. And that's going to definitely influence your ability to discern properly. All right, so let's see if we can get through this section here. The right brain works to harmonize and make sense of a single picture of what you experience at any given moment. Hence, it plays a role in generating emotional charge. The left brain works to break up your experience into threads. So that's not a perfect description, because it turns out that both hemispheres are actually working kind of together all the time. But for the most part, it seems as though, based on what we understand now about the brain, that the right brain thinks holistically and it puts pieces together, and the left brain thinks separatistly, we might say, or individually, and it takes a whole image, and it breaks it up into parts. And so when you're talking about discernment, you're going to use both. You're going to ask yourself, well, what is this thing? We're trying to figure out, I'm trying to think of something that won't necessarily get us yanked off of YouTube. Are UFOs real? Well, you're going to have the question immediately, it's phrased as a holistic question, but you got to break that up into pieces, and you use your left brain to that. What is a UFO? You got to define what the object of a UFO is. You got to define what we mean by reality, and then figure out what the scope and context for that is. So you're going to use your left brain for that. And then when you're done that discernment process, you're going to put those pieces back together with the right brain to actually compare that against reality. Imagine yourself watching a sunset overlooking a mountain valley filled with streams, grass, trees, singing birds, buzzing bees, and wildlife. Your emotional or right brain aspect of consciousness sees the whole picture, a singular experience. And it's the intellectual and left brain aspect that sees each of these things in its territory as a separate, discrete object. So, yeah, you can't ultimately, you can't really separate aspects of reality from each other, but with your intellectual mind, your left brain, you can actually do that to a certain extent. Now, the only reason you can remember a single element of an experience is because the intellectual pattern recognizing aspect of your brain identifies things abstractly. That is, a single tree is a beautiful, in its beautiful sunset scene, is abstract or exists as a thought or idea, but not in the physical reality, because the tree and the landscape can't really be separated from each other. It's only within our consciousness, in our minds, that we can separate the tree from the ground from which it springs forth. It's this left brain aspect that we use the most when we're discerning information from an intellectual perspective. Now, this is a key point. All discernment works by comparing a map of knowledge to reality in some way. A claim, belief, or theory is itself a map of knowledge. It's a claim, it's a drawing. Whether it's a personal claim you just intuited or deduce yourself, or a claim coming from someone else, like a friend or a news agency, a scientific organization, or a government. So step one, let's see, what time is it? Okay, we'll go over this a little bit, and then we'll certainly go over it back again on the next show. So now we're going to get into actually, well, how do we actually do this discernment process? So the first thing we need to do is record what a claim is, saying it in our own words. This is critical. You have to own the claim. You have to make it yours. You have to basically make a copy of it. You know, we don't really do this much now because we got computers, but back in the day, before there were Xerox machines, if you wanted to do research, you actually had to go physically to the library with a pad and paper, and you had to take notes yourself. You had to make a copy. And then with those notes, you could go and think about whatever it is you're trying to study once you got home, if you couldn't take the book home. So discernment is exactly the same. If you want to discern what something is, you have to take the time before you've put any, you've made any conclusions or you've decided what something may or may not be. You got to set aside all your biases and just try to get a clear conceptualization of what exactly the claim is, avoiding any straw manning. Now, this can be the hardest step because we often want to jump in and we want to get to the answer first. This happens all the time, whether it's in conversation or individually. So we have to absorb the claim accurately, and then once we do that, we can actually start to comparing it against reality itself. So it helps to exercise emotional detachment when we're doing this, because we have to be impartial. We have to be just like a judge. A judge, when he's hearing a case or she's hearing a case, they have to set aside their personal interests as much as possible so they can just assess the facts as they are and make sure the facts are truly the facts. We have to properly see a claim and internalize it. We have to make an accurate copy of the map ourselves. Once we have our personal copy, we can proceed with the discernment process. For example, if a friend runs up to you and says, "Oh my God, I just teleported to Venus by a group of highly advanced extraterrestrials," we need to sit down and carefully review as much of the story as possible so we can clearly comprehend what our friend is saying they experienced. If you hear extraterrestrials and immediately dismiss the whole claim as bogus, you've skipped the first step. You've dismissed without investigation. And you're basically referring to you have a prejudicial response based on personal incredulity, which means basically incredulity means incredulous. You think it has no credit worthiness. It is incredible. So you hear this all the time in different parts of the truther community. For example, this is one you hear from flat earthers quite a lot. "Oh, well, there's no such thing as space. Therefore, there's no such thing as aliens. Therefore, there's no such thing as extraterrestrials or UFOs. Well, that might be true, but you didn't really examine the claim. You just threw what we might say an argument from pure logic, assumed that the claim didn't need to be assessed because you already know before you even started the process. That is not discernment. No one, I repeat, nobody can discern whether a claim is true without examining it. You have to examine the claim. You cannot determine if something is true or false or whether something is valuable or not without actually looking at the thing honestly. And you have to have a clear picture of the thing before you make an attempt to discern about it. Okay, so you need to know the claim well. This is critically important. So we already talked about a straw man, so I'll skip this section. Sometimes our instincts flare up and try to convince us that we can skip ahead. The mainstream media are the liars. I don't have to understand what they're saying to know it's a lie. Or it might be Peter Schiff. It might be Hillary Clinton. It might be any number of people. It's like, well, we think they're liars. They're bad people. They're cheaters. Don't even have to listen to what they have to say. And wrong. That is not the case. because a broken clock tells accurate time twice a day, that kind of phrase. So, and more importantly, as much as you might believe that a person is absolutely 100% a liar, it doesn't necessarily mean that what they have to say is not valuable to you. This is the crazy thing I was mentioning earlier, is all information is actually valuable to you, not just true information. And if you try to only claim true information and not digest false information, the interesting thing is that you can't actually determine if something's true or not. So the paradox is that you actually need some amount of false information to know that the true thing is actually true, which we'll get into here, later on. So I want to highlight some of what we're saying here by focusing on this cool image. I'm sure you guys have seen it before. It's, I don't know who came up with this, but brilliant on them from doing so. How the media can manipulate our viewpoints. And this is true of not just the media, but ourselves. Because remember, we don't actually interact with reality. We interact with our maps of reality that we create. Free will is real. Free will is so real that you can literally believe something that is not true. And now the reality itself is hidden behind the veil of your own false belief. Here's a great example of why holistic thinking is critical, like you were saying earlier, Jordan. You might look at the right-hand image and say, oh, well, look, it looks like we got a good enough amount of the picture. It looks like this guy's, one soldier is feeding or giving water to another soldier. Or you might look in the left-hand image and say, oh my God, this one soldier is about to get his brains blown out because there's a gun pointed there. Neither of them is a complete accurate picture of the whole truth. And when you try to holistically see, remember, so you're taking your whole picture and you're asking yourself, after you've dissected it all with your left brain, what does this mean? What is this picture telling me? Well, that holistic process of discernment is fundamentally broken when you don't have all the facts and data points to work with. So this is ultimately, when you see the whole truth, the whole picture, is that the soldier is having water given to them, and they just so happen to have a soldier standing next to them with a gun pointed at their head.
He's about to get hydrated and ventilated.
Yeah. So we'll go ahead and leave it there because we're running out of time. But then the next section, we're going to start to get into some of the different types of claims, how to deal with them, all sorts of really cool stuff. So hopefully y'all are getting something out of this.
Absolutely. So we appreciate all you guys for watching here. Knowledge based on Badlands Media. Also streaming, looks like, on your Stillness in the Storm YouTube channel and your Twitter account, are we?
We sure are. So what's up, YouTube and Twitter? How's it going?
Yep. Go follow Justin Deschamps on Twitter. Go follow Stillness in the Storm on YouTube. Go follow me on Twitter. And I'm on Truth Social, Telegram, Rumble, all those good channels. You can find all of them on jordansather.com, my website. And what's your main website?
Oh, these days, you can go to Stillness in the Storm. I still post news blasts on there every week. And you can go to vigilant.news. That's where the shows are that we do on Badlands. Those are pretty good places for me right now.
Sweet. And that's all for us tonight, guys. We will see you next week, continuing this conversation about discernment. We appreciate you for tuning in. Make sure you like this video, subscribe to Badlands Media, and go follow us on our channels. Take care, everybody. Till next week.
Peace out.